Now, the Hangout on Air is live. The turn of my car into Swiss cheese. Good evening and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Audible live here on our YouTube channel, footballguys.com, youtube.com/footballguys, And I want to immediately jump into the chat room and chat with you as we're going to go through the latest news and notes from across the National Football League. And, of course, fill you in with Dr. Gene Bramall, Sigmund Bloom, and Matt Waldman. Matt, nice hat.
Thanks. Come out to the coast. Let's get together, have a few laughs.
Matt, Bobby. You are my Bobby, Matt Waldman, by the way. Sigmund Bloom here tonight. The roaming camera, always. The camera never lies, Bloom.
It's like Letterman, you know. Yeah, and Die Hard is a Christmas movie. For just to put this to bed, it is a Christmas movie.
1,000%. And if we had to cast, I think Dr. Gene, I think you would be the limo driver. You're the cool guy on the phone hanging out in the basement of Nakatomi Plaza. Am I right, Dr. Gene? Oh, mute button right off the bat.
He's listening to that music.
Fail.
Heads
I was
bobbing.
going to say, I don't know about the limo driver. I am definitely the guy that likes to rub his toes into the carpet for calmness.
Okay. Yes.
You don't remember that part? You remember that part.
We all remember that part. Okay. Yes. And speaking of calmness, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the Denver Broncos. It is a Broncos show. Get over it. And we're going to start things off, Bloom, first with a game update before we get to Dr. Gene. I mean, you're not contractually obligated, but if you could please, sir, that would be nice.
Boy, are the Jags bad, really bad. I mean, this is for rock bottom. I think someone said on Twitter, Gus Bradley lasted longer than Vine. So I guess that's something. Just the Jags are a terrible, terrible football team. And you can add Jalen Ramsey. Everyone maligned the Cowboys for not taking Jalen Ramsey over Ezekiel Elliott. Well, I mean, we don't want to reduce this down to one draft pick, but Jalen Ramsey's not changing the fortunes of this team, even though he's playing up to expectations. Blake Bortles playing down to expectations. They're just a morose football team going through the motions. We're staying bar a 10-foot pole. Give me a 20-foot pole, a 30-foot pole before I touch anybody in this Jags offense from a fantasy, including Allen Robinson at this point. And I guess we'll have a test here of the garbage time inflationary factor that helped Bortles and Robinson and Hearns last year to see if it helps this year, because it's 27-0 and really all in the second quarter. The biggest story here is DeMarco Murray, who appeared, and we'll ask Dr. Gene for his thoughts. A little frustrated. We're probably not going to see him tonight to get any more clarity on whether he could return to the game or not, because there's no need for him to return to the game. So we're going to see a lot of Derrick Henry in the second half. And Mike Tagliere, I got to say, big shout out to Mike Tagliere from on the couch this week. At the end of the show, I brought up Peyton Barber as a surprise league winner. And he said Derrick Henry. He said Derrick Henry was available on 60% of Yahoo League waiver wires. So here's DeMarco Murray actually marching back out of the tunnel now, looking pretty good. I don't know what Dr. Gene will say about that. But that's the biggest fantasy story here. Marcus Mariota looking. I don't even know if you read too much into how Mariota and Kendall Wright had a touchdown, because the Jags just look like they look like an electric football team. Guys remember electric football?
No, you got them. No, you got them. No, you got them.
Yeah. Well, it's just like the electric football. You turn it on and all the players just kind of vibrate and move in random directions. I mean, it's really, really frustrating. But it does give us some clarity going forward on how we can project these matchups with the Jags, because you remember when we felt like maybe the Jags could be a surprise team this year, maybe start to turn it around. This is really, really terrible. And it really is going to make them start evaluating Blake Bortles. I mean, they're going to be back near the top of the draft again. So,
yeah, and you just did clarity, Bloom. So there's our shot. That's our audible drinking game. So we'll get the clarity there. You bring up the electric football, man. I had old Joe Namath hand-me-down one with his big ugly mug in on the middle of the 50-yard line. So that was awesome. I have one sister, Carrie, who's like a huge football fan, huge Broncos fans. My other sister, Marlita, didn't really like football, but she loved my electric football set for some reason. Anyway, we'll move on from that. Let your mind wander. Dr. Gene Bramall is up next, and I want to ask you about C.J. Anderson. C.J. Anderson and this injury with the Denver Broncos, and we're waiting to know about the severity of the meniscus, and waiting on any sort of timetable there. That's what we know, but we have seen a situation where initially this was thought to be a few weeks out to the bye. The second opinion, which led to a third opinion, actually showed more damage. So it wasn't a second opinion like 3 weeks, I'm going to be back this week, and then he was back. No, the second opinion showed more. Surgery happened today at 4 o'clock. Anderson now on the mend. I was texting with him earlier today. Appreciates all the prayers and kind thoughts from everyone. We're going to get into plenty of Devontae Booker because that's your season winner, in my opinion. But Dr. Gene, let's talk about Anderson's knee here.
Yeah, I think we need to wait and get a little bit more information. We've heard bone bruise, we heard small meniscus injury, we heard significant meniscus injury. We heard we weren't sure, then 4 to 6 weeks through the bye, and then some concern about being out for the season. There were multiple reports that he'd be put on injured reserve this afternoon. Mike Kliss later on in the afternoon said 8 to 12 weeks, which of all the reports I think makes the least sense, given the possibilities that we've heard about with the meniscus injury. So, I think to cover all of the bases, one, it's still possible that there's a bone bruise even if there's a meniscus injury, so it doesn't completely rule out the possibility of that. So that could complicate either side of the timetable here. If they got into his knee with the scope and decided that they just needed to remove a small fragment and could do so in such a way that it wouldn't affect his career over the long term, that's a 2 to 4 week recovery period. Although there's not been much agreement yet in the reports, none of the reports have suggested that. So I think we need to prepare ourselves that what he had done this evening was a repair, which puts him probably in the 3-month range at minimum. And a lot of times we'll see that be 4 to 6 months, depending on how significant the injury is, how much they needed to do to repair, and how the first stages of rehab goes, and then maybe the bone bruise on top of it. So and I think it's also notable that we got reports from every angle over the last 24 hours, but over the last 4 hours since the surgery, nothing from nobody. Cecil, you're really the first one I've heard say anything about that the surgery's even been completed and where we are, which obviously is not still continuing. But so I think there's still some information to come. I think, unless you have other information to the contrary, I think we should expect that probably his earliest return is going to be postseason at this point. And, hopefully we'll hear otherwise, but I think that's probably the way this is going to go.
Gene, it sounds like Jordan Reed and Josh Norman made the trip to London, but certainly with Jordan Reed especially, should we assume that they will play? What is between now and game time that they're going to need to pass?
You can assume that they've been cleared to play. That doesn't mean that there won't be any recurrence in symptoms from either one of them during the plane ride, after the plane ride, through their last practice of the week leading up to Sunday morning. So it's not a foregone conclusion. But I don't believe there are any NFL independent neurologists in London. So those guys had that visit before they got on the plane, and they wouldn't have been cleared to get on the plane if they weren't cleared to play by the independent neurologist. So again, that doesn't mean with 100% certainty that they're going to dress and play this weekend, but they've passed that particular stage of the protocol, and we'll see how things progress from there.
Gene, just an update on DeMarco Murray. They said it was a foot injury. He was in the locker room until about a few minutes into the third quarter, and then he jogged back out and was high-fiving everybody and sitting out there. But they said he's questionable to return. Let's go to another running back, though, LeSean McCoy. We talked a lot about him last week. He played about three and a half quarters last week, saw some nice reversals of field, some of the old LeSean McCoy. But then you kind of wonder if that hamstring got a little tired. And if he aggravated or not. You've got him listed as a game time decision limited. Could you give us a little update on him and what you think?
Yeah, I didn't think he was going to play last week. They did allow him to practice a little bit on Friday. They allowed him to talk to the media. But if you watched that, I'm not a master of reading player body language, but it didn't really seem like McCoy wanted to talk to the media. The minute they started pressing him on specifics about how it felt and whether or not he'd be able to play, he really shut down the interview pretty quickly. And I thought that was telling. I also thought it was telling that nobody was paying any attention to him at all during pregame warmups, and the decision had pretty much already been made for him to play. But, we always talk about these midweek injuries being very difficult to come back from within a few days. And it was always seeming to be more than tightness last week. And we're hearing the same things this week as last week. He didn't practice on Wednesday, didn't practice today on Thursday. I suppose there's a chance that we go through the same, I'm not going to say charade, but, limited practice on Friday, talking to the media, getting game time decision, that sort of stuff. But you think that, seeing the likely aggravation that we saw last weekend, knowing the risk that you're under for a longer term absence, if that's the case, I think it's much less likely, especially when LeSean McCoy says immediately after the game, pretty much, it probably wasn't a good idea that I played today, for him to play this week. So I think there's going to have to be a lot of interval healing. Maybe they put him out there on the practice field to see if he's able to do something on Friday, and then we're left with a game time decision. But I still think, what I wrote on Sunday night was, I think it's more likely that they rest him through the Week 10 bye, that he plays this weekend. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily likely. That's just how likely I feel that he's going to play this week, which is not likely at all. So I'm willing to be surprised as I was last week, but he's going to be limited at best. And I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense for them to put him out there unless they're certain that his risk of aggravation is low. And I don't think they can be.
Speaking of players playing through injury, I want to talk about Demaryius Thomas, and I want all fantasy owners to realize, and Broncos fans to recognize, he's not healthy. Now, I've seen this before, Dr. Gene, where on Wednesday, like, Demaryius Thomas looks like an old man. There's no other way to put it. Looks very stiff, very rigid in what he does, sitting there banging on that hip like that. This Wednesday, Demaryius looked the same again. Now, I've seen him look like that and then Sunday catch touchdowns. But this Wednesday, again, kind of the same thing. It's an every other week thing by my math. And then today, a little bit better. I will assume that on Friday, he'll be a little bit better. It's just something that, and we have to change expectations, because now that they've figured out the ground game and now that it's going to be all Booker, we have to adjust expectations anyway. But I'm going to every week from a fantasy lens saying this is an Emmanuel Sanders week, not a Demaryius Thomas week, because I know he's not right. He's actually on the injury report this week. And this is something that won't get better during the season. Am I correct in making that assumption, Dr. Gene? And what have you seen from Demaryius when he's played?
It looks like DeMarco Murray's going to come back here, by the way. But yeah, I'm with you that, we know this is going to be it's already been a chronic issue, not even just this year. It's been something that he's been dealing with for a while. And he may eventually end up choosing to have it fixed in the offseason, but he's going to continue to try to play through it as he's done in the past. And I think what you've described is what we've seen off and on through the first 7 weeks of the season, which is often limited earlier in the week and then gradually progressing in practice. The last time we saw this particular limitation, limited Wednesday and Thursday, I think was week 2 or week 3, and he had a very good game after that. So, he knows how to play through this injury. He knows how to prepare to get ready on Sunday, takes it easy through the middle of the week. And unless we see a surprise DNP on Friday or something specific from a media member that says, I'm really worried about him, and maybe that's what we're hearing from you, then I think we need to take a little bit more care. But I think day to day, week to week is how we look at Demaryius and kind of go from there.
Gene, should we be mad at Russell Wilson? He said that the doctors told him 4 weeks on this knee injury, and he and his nano bubbles have been playing through it. Does that mean that it sets back the recovery timetable, and we're going to look at this? He can lead the team to ties, but not necessarily lead our fantasy team to wins. Is this going to prolong this whole situation of losing his mobility?
Probably not. It raises the risk of an aggravation, and if he aggravates the injury and continues to be less mobile in the pocket for a longer period of time, then yeah, there's an issue there. But I don't know. I think we've seen some interval progression from him, however slight, over the last 3 weeks. He looks relatively effective in the pocket, but he's just not doing much outside the pocket. And I realize in Russell Wilson's case that him not being able to do what he usually does outside the pocket impacts what he does inside the pocket. But I'm not seeing anything that makes me think that he's definitely prolonging how things go there. And basically what it's telling you is he's playing through a mid-grade MCL sprain with that brace. And, he's probably got another week or two, assuming no setbacks or other issues, of him being able to come back and play as we've seen him in the past. But I'm not too worried about anything more than talk at this point. He's defining the injury a little bit better for us.
Gene, any word on Terrell Williams?
Yeah, both Tyrell Williams and Travis Benjamin are mostly just getting some rest. Mike McCoy has said that he realizes those guys are getting a lot more reps in practice and gameplay with the injuries to Antonio Gates and Keenan Allen, and he wants to make sure that he keeps them as fresh as possible through the rest of the season. So even though they didn't practice on Wednesday, they were limited today. Sounds like things are progressing in a positive way for him.
Dr. Gene Bramwell, footballguys.com. It is the Audible Live, our Thursday night hangout, or just Audible Live on our YouTube channel now. We appreciate everyone out there. And the chat room is fired up about DeMarco Murray being out. Why is he out there? Why would he go out there? Chanman20 says, and so does Brian as well. Chat room's fun, as we had earlier today. Of course, everyone chiming in on the Rex Ryan situation, and it was Gain Street Pies that says Rex Ryan is as crazy as he wants to be. So chat room, continue reacting to me, and let's get around here with Dr. Gene a couple of more times. Dr. Gene, I want to say Tyler Eifert, a player that came back last week, and I'm usually, unless your name's Julio Jones or AJ Green, there's a certain level of player like, hey, he's back, I'm starting him. Eifert's not on that level. So, I was happy that in my leagues, I just kind of watched him, I've been stashing him, waiting for him to come back. He was back and he didn't do a lot, but now we're hearing reports that he's going to do more. Do you have confidence that Eifert, maybe even beginning this week, will start to look like the player we remember?
Probably not yet. I don't think he's there yet. It's nice that they're going to trust him with more, closer to what his role had been in the offense in the past. He's not listed on the injury report at all. I don't think DeMarco Murray is particularly right here, but he's trying to play. And what you didn't see around the red zone last week was him really exploding on balls, him clearly getting separation from linebackers. And I don't know that that's going to happen just yet. We talked about this being a 5-month recovery period. We're just now coming up on 5 months after surgery. And then you add the back spasms or, mild degenerative situation, whatever that may have been, into the mix, and you probably push him back a little bit there. So I think it makes sense that it's going to take him a good 2 to 3 weeks to recover. But again, the way that the Bengals are going to use him is in such a way that it supports good statistical production. So, I think he's a guy that you can trust in your lineups, knowing it's going to be a little bit of a higher variance situation than usual for him. But he's going to get used around the red zone, and he's going to get targeted often when he's on the field.
Gene, Lamar Miller, not so much will he or won't he play this weekend, but should we expect him to get his full workload? And is this something that mars his rest of season outlook, this shoulder issue he was playing through on Monday night?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is. It had the look to me of potential shoulder separation, AC sprain. There's also a possibility that the injury was a little bit lower into the muscle of his shoulder on the outside of his shoulder. That would be a little bit less likely to be a lingering situation. That's more of just a muscle contusion, Charlie Horse type situation, more than a ligament tissue, which is what a shoulder separation is. So without knowing the specifics of the injury, it's hard to know how long it might linger. Bill O'Brien seemed to be pretty positive about things on Thursday, thought he looked a lot better today than he did the day before, and said he was encouraged. We've seen that from Bill O'Brien before and found out that there really wasn't much to be encouraged about. So Friday practice participation is going to be important for him. Related to the question of whether or not we can expect him to get his full workload, from an injury standpoint, I think we need to know what goes on tomorrow, but you guys can speak to this. There's some concern about whether or not Alfred Blue can be successful in what he's doing. He looks okay running the ball, but that fumble was a little bit of a killer for him last week. So, if Miller is healthy, I think they'd like to give him close to his full workload. But there's also been some indications that as they work him into the offense a little bit more, that they do want to keep him a little bit more fresh. So I think, all that said, I think probably the sweet spot is going to be 15 to 20 touches this weekend, which is probably a little bit less than he would ordinarily get in a best case scenario. So we'll see how it progresses on Friday.
How about the ongoing saga of Jamal Charles? Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, it's not good. A little bit of knee swelling within the first weeks to months after ACL repair is not, or reconstruction rather, is not all that uncommon for it to happen at this point. The first week after he really ramps up his practice participation and full game action is worrisome. And they've got Charcantric West there now, so they don't need Jamal Charles. They've got him involved in a couple of packages, but I think as well as Spencer Ware is playing, with Jamal Charles not looking effective in those packages. You saw him get, I think it was 12 touches 2 weeks ago. Last week it was, I think, just 2, and he didn't look great doing them. So, we're hearing he's been limited in practice. There's some expectation that he's going to play, but until we see him get back to full practices and look explosive on the field, I think you can write him off as a fantasy option for the season.
He is Dr. Gene Bramble. We'll go around the horn one more time here, and I'm going to take a question from our chat room, which Bloom is so mesmerized with this game that I haven't seen you chat yet, Bloom.
No, I'm not. I did pop in to tell everyone that Cody Latimer's 5th on the depth chart, and that one you wouldn't be able to know whether it was me or Cecil.
Okay, I didn't know that if your cat had jumped on your keyboard again. Anyway, let's take this one, and to the chat room we go, and it says, for Michael Schultz, Dr. Gene, what's up with McKinnon? Asiata, a sneaky start?
Probably won't be so sneaky after tomorrow. It's a Monday Night Football game, so it's hard to know exactly where we are with McKinnon, but he was seen in the locker room today in a walking boot. Mike Zimmer hasn't a whole lot to say about him. It's early in the week as far as practice participation goes for these Monday Night Football games, so maybe there's an outside chance that we see him get to a limited practice, but I really think at this point, walking boot on Thursday, 4 days after his last game in which the mechanism looked like a high ankle sprain. This has more of the look of a multi-week injury than it does him getting back this week.
I mean, we finally got specific information on Dion Lewis, who did return to practice. His setback, a patellar stress fracture. So what light at all does this shed on if we should expect him back, whether we should expect him to look like himself at the beginning of his return, et cetera, now that we actually have hard information?
Yeah, it definitely shed some light on what's going on, but for me, it kind of confuses the picture a little bit because I'm not sure I understand the speed at which he's recovered. So it's not a rare complication, but it's a known complication of ACL injuries. When they remove part of the patellar tendon to use as the new ACL, they take part of the kneecap with it as the bony anchor. And all of that gets anchored in with screws and sutures in the knee. So there's a little defect in that kneecap that in the early stages of rehab now, these guys almost immediately are doing range of motion and weight bearing as soon as possible. It can cause a stress reaction in that area. And the other tidbit of information we got this week was that they noticed the concern in July, tried to rehab him for 4 weeks. He didn't get better, and then they decided to do the surgery in August. I could not find a rehab protocol that suggested an athlete would start the final stages of rehab before 10 to 12 weeks. And this week, Dion Lewis is just 8 weeks after surgery. So it's a little bit unusual. But every report that we're hearing today and that I've been told suggests that his rehab is going pretty well. And a lot of that has to do with quad steering going in, which we know Dion Lewis had a lot of. So the Patriots had another 3 weeks to sit on Dion Lewis while he was on PUP and not start the 3-week practice must be returned to the active roster timetable. So they really seem like they're positive about how Dion Lewis is progressing. There's just no reason for them to risk that right now with LeGarrette playing so well and knowing they might need Dion Lewis later. So I think that's a pretty good sign that he's on the verge of returning. It may not be until week 11. They may bring him back slowly and in limited packages, but I think it's pretty positive for his effectiveness this year, depending on how many snaps and reps he gets. I do think, though, given the fact that the rehab protocols might suggest otherwise, that he may be at risk of a cascade injury. He may be at risk of a little bit of a setback. But again, I just don't think that they would have activated him, Patriots, among all other teams, unless they were pretty confident that they were out of the woods in those regards.
I lost track. Was that me?
That's you, buddy.
That silence was deafening, man. I'm sorry about that.
We're all staring at your hat.
I'm telling you, it's so lovely. I had my vote. I voted sticker on today, but I took that off. So how about Mr. Tony Romo? Where are we at with Tony?
Tony has at least been cleared to come back to a limited practice at this point. I felt like there was some indications earlier this week and late last week that he had been, that his imaging studies were such that he had been cleared for contact. They're not letting him do that just yet. And again, I think this has as much to do with Dak Prescott playing well. They don't want to bring back Tony Romo any earlier than is absolutely necessary and risk him having a setback and losing him as a backup if Prescott gets hurt, or if they bring Romo back and he gets, it's just, so I think they're going to take a little bit extra time with him. And it really seems like, Prescott's the starter at this point. So why rush him? I think it's a good sign that we're seeing some limited practice from him, but I think when he's ready to come back, he's coming back as the backup.
He is Dr. Gene Bramall. You follow him on Twitter at Gene Bramall. And, of course, you check out his work at footballguys.com. Now, this one comes in from Mike DeLong in the chat room, Dr. Gene. Before we let you out of here, it says, what's behind the hanging curtain, Doc?
Just a window. But it gets bright back there. I put that curtain up a couple of years ago when we did a special Zoom hangout with our boss, Joe Bryant, and he told me it looked like I had a halo behind my head and that I needed to cover the window. So it's been covered ever since. That's the story behind the curtain.
I just remember the lightning storm that we had one time.
Yeah.
And we were hopeful your power didn't go out. Your power never goes out. He powers through. He's Dr. Gene Bramall. And that bloom is what we call a segue. Dr. Gene, be good, baby.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
There we go. Dr. Gene Bramall.
We had to have him hide his halo. I mean, little kids see it from like miles away.
They're just so drawn to it, of course, because angels are among us, and we have proof. By the way, we're all horrible people. I guess maybe not. We're not that bad. I'm speaking for all three of us. We're a little dastardly. I think the best way to describe us three.
A little wicked.
Yeah, we're a little wicked. We're a little dastardly. Dr. Gene's like the best guy in the world.
Saint Gene. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I get that question is Dr. Gene as nice? Yes. Nice.
But he's that guy that hangs out in that room in Constantine, in the bar in Constantine, with all the other people that may not be. He seems to be okay with that, though. Bless him.
I'm glad he's okay with us. Bloom, I'm not okay with this game. What's the latest?
6 straight possessions. The Titans have scored. They went right down the field. Laney Walker with a long run. As Gene said, DeMarco Murray's out there. Doesn't look quite like he did before his issue, but 10 days, you hope he'll be fine for next week. Certainly Tennessee, as long as they get to play Jacksonville. And Tennessee's bye is not until week 13, the new week 13 bye. So this is the mini bye for DeMarco Murray, finishing it off with a touchdown to Rashard Matthews. And like I said, we'll get to test out the Blake Bortles garbage time theory. It's garbage time already, at the beginning of the second half. Right now, they got a 3rd and 20, though, after Allen Hurns got a catch. And Allen Robinson owners, yes, it is that bad. Someone's asking if Allen Robinson is droppable. Ryan Connell 8 on Twitter. I wouldn't drop him, but at the same time, I wouldn't be starting him. And we again, another big thing out of this is we look at Jacksonville's schedule now. And we're certain. Look who they play in Week 16. Tennessee, DeMarco Murray owners, we can hold up. But next week, Kansas City. Spencer Ware. You're just gonna step right through these because this team looks like they've lost it. I'm not sure what else you have to do to get fired if you're Gus Bradley.
Well, I was just gonna ask, why does Gus Bradley have his job?
Yeah.
Well, I think after that 3rd and 13 backed up in their own red zone and DeMarco Murray's able to run to the left for a first down at the end of the half, that's one in that Supernaw touchdown. I was waiting for them to pan to Gus Bradley to see if he saw that his job just flashed before his eyes because it was bad.
Yeah, it's called not for long for a reason in the National Football League. And every single year, there seems to be someone that comes out as a league winner about the midway point of the season that maybe you weren't expecting. Maybe some were, Bloom. We know the conversations about C.J. Anderson this year and Booker in the 55th. No, they started out heavy Anderson. And I want to go back to a conversation that I've had with Gary Kubiak and that I rekindled today because so many people are like, get Capri Bibbs and all that. And, whatever. I could do a 2-hour show on Capri Bibbs. But I want to focus this on Booker because – The answer Gary Kubiak has always had for me, and again, he's pretty honest with what he says, not a lot of coach speak, but is he a committee guy or a bell cow guy? And he says it depends on the back. Well, we saw that it was going to be a committee and a 50-50 split committee that was successful against Houston. Granted, we have to recognize the opponent. But this is all Booker. This is going to be all Booker. So if I look at a season winner, I look at a team that plays great defense, wants to run the ball, has kind of figured that out. They had a coming to Jesus moment a couple of weeks ago in the meeting rooms where things got personal, as they do sometimes in a family. Sometimes in a family, you have those behind closed doors talks, and maybe you're pretty blunt with each other on what needs to happen. The Broncos did that. The ground game was fixed. Now Anderson is done for fantasy owners. Maybe he's back for the playoffs, whatever. But this is Booker, and more Booker. Maybe Capri Gibbs, maybe Barry Gibbs. Maybe Capri Bibbs get you like 5 carries a game. Maybe. But I think this is just as much Booker as he can handle. In fact, Gary Kubiak said that on Wednesday, I believe. So I'm getting my days confused because they played Monday and my schedule's all messed up. But Bloom, you're not messed up. You're on top of these things.
Yeah.
I'm saying all Booker all the time. In fact, I went as far as to say it on the air and on Twitter that if there is an 8-game 1,000-yard rusher, it's Devontae Booker this year. Can he do what Gary Brown did back in the day? Can he do what Kevin Jones did back in the day, back in the closer day for the Lions?
Right.
And Motorboat. Well, let's talk about this Booker thing. I'm seeing huge RB1, top 10 fantasy value. If he gets 1,000 yards in what's essentially 9 games now, not going to be surprised at all.
And some of it's the situation. So I had Devontae Booker as a buy high in the sense that his value is going up, but I still think his owners might not see him as that, especially if he's their 4th running back and they've just had him on the bench. And by the way, this is the big part. And see, I guess we haven't made this speech yet on the waiver wire, but this is This is a good moment to make it. This is when you're stocking your bench with backup running backs. And that's why Capri Bibbs is still a good pickup, because if Devontae Booker goes down, or, the possibility with Booker is he had some fumble issues at Utah. Certainly with the rookie, there's a point where they may want to look back, get him more of a veteran if that becomes an issue. But, for instance, in our Apex Experts League, my bench, so I drafted Todd Gurley and Mark Ingram in the 1st and 3rd round. And then my bench was Alfred Blue, Devontae Booker, Rob Kelley, D'Angelo Williams, and actually Thomas Rawls got dropped, so I picked him up. And this is what you want to be doing with your bench. You want to have just enough depth, especially if your quarterback and tight end bye weeks are over and you have an every week quarterback and every week tight end. Because this is when Tim Hightower last year, this is when it happens. And maybe Derrick Henry eventually, depending on what happens with his foot issue. So I do think the situation, Denver's going to keep the ball on the ground. They want to keep Trevor Siemian only passing the ball 25 times a game. I think that you'll see the defense always keeping the game close enough. Well, maybe not last week, but usually keeping the game close enough that the running game stays on track. Booker is an excellent running back, a receiver out of the backfield. And then, and Matt, I know Matt and I talked about Devontae Booker a few times this offseason because he's a bit difficult to decipher when you're trying to translate his game. But one of the things that stood out to me was that he wants the workload. At Utah, he wanted to be like a 30-touch game back. He wants to put the offense on his shoulders. He runs with great energy, and I think that it's all full speed ahead for Devontae Booker, and this is your potential league winner, absolutely. And it should then make your next thought be, who are some other running backs on the waiver wire that we can tell maybe not as good of a story, but a similar story.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about those guys too. Matt, are you selfieing it up? What's going on there?
I'm just Instagramming some parts of the game here, that's all.
All right, what are your thoughts on Devontae Booker moving forward? All foot on the gas, everything ready to go? Because I picked up some Bibbs buzz, and maybe it's my sensitivity or just natural overreaction. Like, what's this is going to be all Booker. Not a little tiny bit of Bibbs, but not enough for fantasy owners to be relevant. And I think if something happens to Booker, Bloom, honestly, I don't know what they would do, but some sort of committee with Jamal Thompson, trade for Darren McFadden. I don't know. Of course, the trade deadline's what, Tuesday? Anyway, Matt, Booker, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Booker is certainly a top 15 back at least. And I think that you can safely put him in that range when you're making deals. If you have to knock it down a peg from top 10, maybe you can agree to the fact that he'll be a top 15 pick, or you can get the other person to agree to that. And when you're looking at Booker, I think the strengths that we're seeing right now that made him a little difficult for me, at least, to see how he would translate fully is that he was very good if you tried to tackle him high, but he seemed to go down if you tackled him low. And he was so decisive through a crease. He often kind of hit it so hard that it reminded me a lot of backs like Tevin Coleman, or more gap-oriented backs who might be going to a zone scheme and seem a bit more like a fish out of water once they make that transition to the NFL zone game, where the defenses are a little bit tougher than what you see in the college game. But so far, when you watch Booker play on both gap plays and zone plays, you see that decisive ability to just hit the gas pedal as soon as he takes the ball and still maintain the proper distance behind his pulling blocks and get through a crease. It's still there. I mean, he paces himself really well, but he's running very hard and fast through that crease right away. And that generates that momentum type of power that he gets, that when defenders just try to reach him, it's kind of like watching one of those guardrails get smashed by an 18-wheeler going through one of those types of situations. I can't even think of the thing anymore, a tollway. But basically, when you look at the things that made him not quite as good as CJ Anderson would be that Anderson has more power from a stop-start standpoint. He can be at a stop, someone grab him and still push the guy or pull the guy for 3 to 4 yards. Anderson has better stop-start ability in terms of changing direction and being able to make hard cuts. Booker has change of direction skill, but he's not as dynamic in that range, so it makes him a little less creative when the original crease isn't there. But so far, every run we've seen so far, it seems like that the crease is there, he hits it hard, he gets through it. I'm not anticipating that to happen all the time, but the good runs in college, the good runs in the pros so far, I've seen very few bad runs from him, or situations where it's closed up in the crease that he's intending to go to, and he doesn't know what to do. So he's going to get tested, but I would feel really good about having him on my roster. And I agree with you that he is a potential guy that you would ride down the stretch and set your team ablaze.
Set it ablaze with the Seattle running back situation. Matt, I'm going to toss it back to you and talk about Thomas Rawls, because we're getting questions in the chat room about that Rawls situation. We know it could be a huge week for Christine Michael this week against the Saints. Awesome, cool. And Rawls will be back, and what does that do to everything in Seattle?
Yeah, that's the big question. It's the elephant in the room, and we don't really know. I mean, I think that the way that it's discussed, there are a lot of fantasy owners and analysts out there who are like, oh, well, when he gets back, and the way it's talked about, Michael hasn't done anything unbelievably great right now for him to keep that job. And I'm thinking, I don't know. Last I looked in the rankings, he was a top 12 back. I think that's pretty darn good. And that would qualify as, I think, in most leagues, as, what do you call that? A running back 1 in fantasy football? Yeah. So I don't know if Rawls is absolutely going to just jump in there because just take over for that job. I think that Christine Michael has looked very good in terms of his ability to make cutbacks, and to be able to play at a level where you can count on him when the creases are there. Now, is Rawls a back who can maybe do a little bit more when the creases aren't there? And the answer may be he might be a little better in that department. And that's enough where I can see Pete Carroll at least giving him the time that they were going to give CJ. They gave CJ Spiller and Alex Collins, and that amounts to somewhere between 5 to 8 touches. And then he can build on it from there from a competition standpoint. The thing that you have to understand about Pete Carroll that makes people nervous about Christine Michael is that we all know that Pete Carroll values competition. And if you are the better player, he's going to continue to feed you the ball or give you opportunities and get you on the field a little bit more. And it's not a political situation. I mean, Spencer Ware was a player who wasn't even drafted by that team. And but after the first training camp, he was seeing more time than Robert Turnman and Kristen Michael combined in the lineup in relief of Marshawn Lynch. So if Rawls looks good that first week, you're pretty much good to go. So it's a gamble to buy low on him right now. But if you don't do it, you may have to buy high on him later on.
Gotta be careful about that. Chris Chateau Bloom wants to hear some health tips from Bloom because you're looking so fit and trim.
Yeah. Split meals and exercise.
Lots and lots of exercise. Exercise is fun. Exercise up, down, in, out, all that kind of stuff. Lots of exercise.
Jazzercise. Jane Fonda's workout, for those of you that remember that one. That's the best I could do.
I can't embarrass you anymore, Bloom. Look at you. You're not even turning red.
No, not at all. Coming soon to headphones near you with the latest jam. I think we're gonna.
You really want to do the Sex God podcast?
I do. I might want to do that more than the Audible even.
Okay, well, let's keep your mind on football for now, Bloom.
Yeah, penetration.
And I want to get your thoughts on Thomas Rawls, the penetrator.
And I think that we're seeing hints here of loyalty. I think that Pete Carroll is going to, and I agree with what Matt said from a fantasy standpoint. Christian Michael's been getting those touchdowns, but he hasn't necessarily ran away with the job or done something to make them relegate Thomas Rawls to a backup position. So I do think that you are going to see, as Matt laid out, Thomas Rawls is going to get a chance to win his job back, or at the very least turn this into a backfield. So I still think Rawls should not be on any waiver wire anywhere, as we're within shouting distance. We're at that point now. Sammy Watkins is within shouting distance of returning 3-4 weeks, and he has a great playoff schedule. Dion Lewis is. Ladarius Green is. There's just a lot of these pickups now that if you can find a spot now as we go through the bye week gauntlet, these guys can help you. Thomas Rawls already was on his way to being a league winner last year. Now, maybe Christian Michael being there would keep him from being a league winner, but it doesn't mean he can't necessarily regain form. But it's the same time, someone like Jamal Charles, Spencer Ware situation is there to remind us that it's not a foregone conclusion that Rawls comes all the way back. So this is just something to watch. And I do think that you're going to see Seattle's offense continue to get better as Russell Wilson gets healthier. And I guess it's a moment to put in perspective again that Rawls had 5.5 yards per carry last year as a rookie behind a line that wasn't doing much before he was running. So he's a really good running back. We forget that. The question is whether his body is where it was or will get back to where it was last year. Rawls absolutely should not be on any waiver wire because of what he's demonstrated he can do.
Matt, let's go talk about Rob Kelley. I need an update on Matt Jones. From earlier today, it looked like Jones was not practicing. Has anything changed on that, Bloom? About Matt Jones?
No. And I am looking right now to see.
Double check.
I'm guessing that he made the flight, but he did not practice today. And I do think we're looking at Rob Kelley and, of course, Chris Thompson with his pretty stable role as that Bonnie Bernard back to complement whoever they have as the power back.
Right, and the power back looking like it could be Rob Kelley. Now, Matt, I want to pick your brain. Usually I pick Lorenzo Doss's brain about Rob Kelley or Orleans Darkwa, but there's a large back who does have some good footwork when it comes to changing direction for a big man. He does have build-up power, in my opinion, not necessarily a fast guy. But as we've seen, Matt Jones isn't the most creative or fastest or most powerful runner, but he can have success and has had some success in Washington. I think Chris Thompson retains that change of pace role, and he's just so fast to and through the hole. It's blinding. And every time I watch Chris Thompson run, I think Shanahan's probably sitting back somewhere being like, there was my guy. That was and him and Alf, of course. Alf. We're going to get Tyler Columbus on this show, by the way. But let's talk about Rob Kelley, Matt, and your thoughts.
I'd rather talk about Chris Thompson too, but I guess, but that's the one thing I agree with Mike Shanahan about is the talents of Chris Thompson, but Rob Kelley is certainly a good player, and he's proven that that he can get the job done in the NFL. He's not special athletically by any stretch of the imagination, but if the line is blocking well enough and you get balance in the passing game, he's a decent player. And what's going to be interesting with him more or less is whether they can continue to achieve that balance run pass, because he's not going to be in situations where he's subbing for Matt Jones on third down situations or known passing situations, and they run the ball and no one's been expecting that, and he tears through a couple of players and gets into the open field in the flat. We're not going to see that as the starter. But at the same time, if you're looking for a player who can get you the requisite fantasy points to feel like I've got a low-end starter and maybe some upside for, in the red area, not a bad play at all.
Can I interject here?
Yeah, go for it.
On going back to the Thomas Rawls discussion, because Bob Condato wrote a story about this, and at Stun Parrot Norwegian Blue brought this to my attention, that Sherman Smith, the Seahawks running backs coach, said, I told the group, running backs that is, the good news is we're getting what's blocked for them. But the bad news is we're not getting more than what is blocked for them. We got to extend runs. We got to break tackles and be more physical. And they're talking about Christian Michael ducking out of bounds at the end of a few runs. And he said, we don't want the coach running out of bounds, particularly that yard makes a difference. I would tell a guy, run out of bounds if you're going to get banged up and get an extra yard for 2nd and 9. That makes no sense. But if you get a first down or touchdown, you get it. So I think that you're seeing these coaching comments absolutely opening the door, not just for Thomas Rawls to have a role, but if Thomas Rawls ran the way he did last year, then I think you may see him flip the situation back. So when the running back coach is making those kind of public comments, challenging Christian Michael, I'll be very interested to see how he runs this week against New Orleans as a forebearer, precursor to how much opportunity Rawls will get. But it sure sounds like he'll get the opportunity to have as much as he can earn, and he earned it all last year.
How does Michael respond to challenges now that he's, keeping
the awakening,
because
woke.
A guy at a certain point, from a running back standpoint, it's like you've done all these things, but it's still not enough in the eyes of your team. We see that with other teams as well. Let's move on from that and talk about Melvin Gordon, Bloom. We brought it up on the preview show. I'll quickly recap it. And speaking of running back coaches that make public statements about monitoring Melvin Gordon's workload, from a running the ball standpoint and just success and yards per carry and all that, Melvin Gordon hasn't been quite as successful, but those touchdowns keep him fantasy relevant. That's for damn sure. And when I talked to Mike McCoy this week, I asked him, like, are you really going to monitor his workload? And he said, we're not going to put a specific number on his snaps. But yes, it is something that we are watching. Well, how does that give you any pause with Gordon, Bloom, or are you just riding out the touchdown score?
You ride out the touchdown score because Phillip Rivers is playing really well. Because I look at San Diego's schedule, and after Denver this week, they got Tennessee and Miami and Houston, Tampa, and then the playoff schedule: Carolina, Oakland, and Cleveland in weeks 15 and 16. Those are touchdown bonanza games. So I think even if Melvin Gordon continues to run for 3.5 yards a carry, if it's on 15 carries instead of 23 carries, but you still see them calling his number in the red zone where he has been so successful, that doesn't change my perspective. So I'm not looking to sell high on Melvin Gordon at this point, because as long as he can last until those Oakland and Cleveland matchups, those could be league-winning games for you.
Matt, what's changed with Melvin Gordon? Because when I asked Mike McCoy that, he was like, 11 guys playing better. 11. He emphasized it twice. He was a little upset. I understand that, Coach, but really, what's Gordon doing differently? Because he didn't look like this last year.
Well, it's kind of like the opposite of Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles 2 years ago worked with Tom House and worked on his technique and worked on how to play the game, and everything was tight. Everything was working right. And this year he didn't do that. And now he's got this elongated arm motion and he can't read cover 2 anymore for some reason, or maybe he doesn't ever recognize it in the first place. Then when you're taking a look at Melvin Gordon, well, he worked with Adrian Peterson in the offseason. So, that helps you understand what you need to do to prepare for the league. And second of all, he's healthy. So that matters a great deal, because he's always been a hard-cutting, agile, quick burst type of back. And when your knee's bothering you and you need microfracture surgery, well, you're probably not going to be all that effective. Say, like, Kenneth Dixon with that ginormous brace that he's had on his leg since he came back. So when you look at someone like Melvin Gordon, you have that equation plus the fact that, there's 6 other guys in the offensive line who are healthy and they're playing well and they're starters rather than them, Ubering guys into practice and having them play on the offensive line and having no organization whatsoever, kind of like, Minnesota Vikings in past years or Cleveland Browns quarterbacks. So when you look at Melvin Gordon, this is a situation where everything has really improved for him. And he ran hard last year. I was not impressed with him in that area as a collegiate player. But as a rookie, he was tough, even though they were short losses or no gainers that I watched. He didn't go down on the first hit. He worked very hard. He showed a lot of heart in those situations. And now some of the creases are there. They're being a little bit more inventive with the running game because they have the horses in front of him to be able to do so. And he's making he's doing a pretty good job of it. I mean, there were a number of plays, even though his 3.5 yards per carry isn't great. There have been some plays where I've watched Carl Joseph get welcomed to the NFL, coming up into the box and being like a step away from Gordon and completely whiffing. And then the next week, TJ Ward, who might be the best in the box safety against the run, whiffing on Gordon as well on Thursday night. So what you have is a healthy guy who's playing to his potential, just needs a little bit more help around him. And I think, still, when you see what he's doing for you fantasy-wise, you ignore the yards per carry and just continue to roll with him.
Chat room, react to me because it's your time. I'll pick a couple of questions here for Matt and Sigmund, or for me. As we had one earlier, Bloom, about who picks our songs. Well, both of us do.
We do.
I think you can kind of tell, by the way.
It's a Bloom week or it's a Lammy week.
If it's a driving metal week. If it's hip-hop, it's both of us, though.
That's true.
They're sweating to the oldies and they're sweating to 90s RB. Which one does Sigmund Bloom do? And let's get some questions from you in the chat room here. I can't
wait till we talk about Nick Chubb.
I did want to just quickly, and even by quickly, I could just say, I want to see you guys nod your heads, yes or no. Because we're getting questions in the chat room earlier today about the Green Bay running back situations. Nile Davis, Don Johnson. I know it's Jackson. I call him Don Johnson anyway. Where's my pastels coat?
I can feel it.
Is there anything? I feel like when anyone brings up Green Bay running backs, I feel like Officer Bar Brady in South Park. Like, nothing to see, people. So, like, yes, no, anything to look at.
Unless
here?
It's Ty Montgomery, no.
Yeah, is that what it is, Matt? Just Ty Montgomery.
Yeah, I'm just afraid to play somebody like Chase Stewart, who I'm killing in a league, and him have like Nile Davis, and somehow Nile Davis just like pulls it out of his back pant pocket and like somehow beats me, with Niles Davis, because that would be my luck, especially with Chase, that lucky dastardly guy.
Yeah, he's dastardly as well. This one comes in from the real Dr. Bigfoot. McKinnon droppable for Rawls' own C-Mike.
I wouldn't do it. I mean, I like McKinnon, but I think that we're seeing McKinnon is already, the goods are damaged, and Asiata, the guy's like Coach Catnip, even though he's not necessarily excellent in any aspect of the game. He does everything well. He's dependable. So, if it's a situation where you might need this running back because of buys in the next week or two to play, then I might be inclined to hold McKinnon. But Rawls is more likely to be a season changer at this point.
Andrew Chrisman says, any hope for a Dwayne Washington breakout? Matt, we got to talk Lions backs again. But I think we both like Washington. That's weird.
We do both like Washington, but I'm just not sure that's really going to matter at this stage. I mean, if Forset's probably a better all-around player right now, and just because Washington is still a little bit unproven in pass protection, and that's kind of the deal that we need to see a little bit more from him. And Forset's a guy that may have earned that trust even early on.
Do you know what I love, Matt? I love many things about you, my friend, but you know what I love is when we first get in the car to go to the Senior Bowl, when we first get in, and there's that little dance that we do. Have you noticed this? Because we've done it for years. because we'll start talking about college prospects. We don't get a large chance to talk about college prospects like during the year. So that car ride, we should like Facebook Live that car ride. Have to clean it up for radio purposes, but like the little dance we do where we start like, well, I like this about him. Well, I like that about him. Well, I like this about him. I mean, remember this year I got in the car complaining about Paxton Lynch? Yep. How things work out.
I still occasionally watch Russell Wilson and smile and watch him stand up and jerk up like he wanted to go, what, bro? What, bro?
Come at me, bro.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get a couple questions in from Matt Jarvis. PPR rest of the season, Michael Thomas or Terrell Williams? Thomas and getting the red zone looks, Bloom, something that people aren't talking about. Thomas is getting used a lot more near pay dirt.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, and also Drew Brees at the weekly ceiling there. I like Terrell Williams, but Michael Thomas is trending up, and I think that you're going to see him be at least the most consistent Saints receiver week to week, if not the most valuable between now and the end of the season.
It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night. Benjamin Weber chimes in. He says, how bad a play is Deshaun Jackson this week? Bye-week blues and London blues as that pizza's coming up. Matt, let's talk about Deshaun Jackson. I guess that's my reaction. Indigestion.
I'm starting him, and I have him I'm in a 4 wide receiver league where he's a startable guy, and it's worth a shot. I mean, that's pretty much the way that you look at it. I mean, certainly they are trying to scheme plays for him, and there are times that they've been successful. I mean, I've looked at Jackson on some of these deep crossers, and he's getting open there, and Cousins is capable of hitting some of those. And, depending on which way Cousins gets hit, on the next play, he seems to be hit back into place sometimes, and he's able to throw something accurately down the field to hit Jackson. It just depends on the week, the hit, and what it knocks around in that marble of a noggin there.
Is Paul Perkins worth holding on to, Bloom? Brian Comer wants to know that.
In a typical 12-team, 20-man league, I could see making a spot for him. The Giants are in their bye, coming out of the bye. This is often when you reset priorities. Rashad Jennings is really below replacement value at this point. Paul Perkins, they had a good drive when he was in, I think, before the bye. He's had a few big plays. He's looked decent as a receiver. So I do think that he's one of those. I think Wendell Smallwood's another guy that we're going to see more of at some point this year. So as you're going through the bye week gauntlet and you have, you can drop the extra quarterback or tight end that you didn't need, or defense, something like that. Names, you might not necessarily just sort by points year to date. You look at some of these guys like Perkins and Smallwood as rookies that certainly will have more second half opportunity.
G's 13 asks Matt, he's trying to get Evans in a trade. Gordon straight up enough, or does he need to throw in more?
No, I think that's a good straight up deal.
Straight up, make it happen. Joe,
yeah.
I apologize, Joe, because I'm going to butcher your last name. Loyacano, I think. Should I bench Jordy Nelson until Rodgers remembers he's not on the IR? Bloom, we talked about this on the preview show a little bit.
Well, let's see what Randall Cobb. I didn't get a chance to ask Dr. Gene about Randall Cobb. Let's see about Randall Cobb this week. If Randall Cobb doesn't play, he's very questionable. Then I would go back to Nelson. I would generally go back to Nelson. I do think that this new look offense is going to de-emphasize him as they march down the field, because he's not creating separation right off of the line in his first break quickly the way that Adams and Montgomery out of the backfield and Cobb have been doing. But he still was making us fantasy money in the red zone, and I think they'll still be knocking on the door in the red zone a lot. So I'm not ready to give up on Nelson yet this week, but I do think if he doesn't get it done this week, I'm afraid he is the odd man out with this new offense.
Zach chimes in. I offered Terrence West and Ingram for Booker in a standard league. Is he crazy, Matt?
Is he crazy for offering that to
West
get that?
and Ingram to try to get Booker?
No, I don't think that's crazy, because while Ingram is a nice, consistent player in certain respects, he doesn't have a high ceiling, and Booker does have a high ceiling. So, and we know that I believe that West is on the way out. I mean, it may take another 2 to 3 weeks, and we may be in those situations where half the people who have been heeding the Kenneth Dixon bandwagon call are going to be out of contention by the time he actually starts playing well. But those who survive may actually look back and go, I'm glad I was the last one to pick up Kenneth Dixon. So I like this deal. It's a little aggressive. It may be paying a little more than what you'd like, but I'd do it.
I wish Kenneth Dixon would get out of the brace that looks like he's wearing one of those massage things. You've seen those the pants that guys get into, Matt, that they just massage your legs with the heat, or that's shock therapy. I don't know what it is, but it's like
I thought it was one of those sumo outfits that you play.
Kenneth Dixon, new spokesperson for Sumo U. Bloom, let's wrap it up. But Dr. Smith's system says Corey Coleman, hold on or shut him down.
Low on the priority list of the guys to pick back up. He could be back in a week or two. If Cody Kessler's the quarterback, I'm not as excited here, and it does look like he'll get the job back as soon as he's cleared, maybe even back for this week. So not a priority over guys like Rawls and Lewis and Ladarius Green. But the thing that could help him here is if Terrell Pryor's hamstring acts up. So he's on my radar, but he's out there running, still can't catch the ball, still a week or two away. And in that Cleveland situation, I'm not sure that he rises to the top of that with Duke Johnson, Gary Barnidge, and Terrell Pryor if it's Cody Kessler throwing the ball, who does seem to have great chemistry already with Pryor.
Matt Walkman, final thoughts.
Did you know Ray Charles played the saxophone?
Ooh.
There you go. What other trivia you got for us?
The human head weighs 10 pounds.
I think it's 8 pounds, but yes.
Yeah, that's what the little blonde kid said. So I just was trusting him.
With a lisp too, like the baby talk thing. Like I saw a commercial the other day. I was like, "Come on, the baby talk thing is not." It's like a 10-year-old, like, "Would you, mommy?" Like all this baby talk. I'm like, "Come on."
I will add one thing for real, and that is that it's nice to see Marquise Lee actually start to look like an NFL player. Over the past few weeks, they've been using him a little bit more and more, and he ran some nice routes tonight, made some good plays, and he might be the most consistent receiver on that roster right now.
What happened that last year at USC, though? Because it was like, junior Marquise Lee was pretty good, and senior Marquise Lee was pretty terrible.
Yeah, I don't know, but the joke, what they were calling him like the white tiger or something for a while,
right,
in camp, because it was so unusual to see him actually stay healthy. And he had real issues catching the football. I mean, he was always a decent route runner. He was immature being able to make plays after the catch because he was always trying to hit the home run and lose 15 to gain 5. But it was one of those scenarios. Now he looks a little more mature. He's been steady. He's going to be a player to watch. I would keep an eye on him.
All right, Bloom, final thoughts, and save me from a rant about how I don't think baby talk is cute, especially when your actors are 13 years old.
Ooh, is that Matt Castle out there?
Can we put Instagram on my phone, mommy?
Oh, Matt Castle. Matt Castle can involve to can we? No. It's can the Titans win the division? I mean, how do the Colts lose to the Jags? The AFC South continues to be, a division that doesn't necessarily bring us happiness as football fans, but certainly we got a good chance to see Derrick Henry. We got a chance to see him get some more run. And, well, the Sunday night game will be good. Philly and Dallas.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. It is the Audible, ladies and gentlemen. Thursday nights.
Adam Sandler and Rocky Balboa. Man of multiple talents.
Yes. See, Sigmund Bloom, you follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. Matt Waldman is at Matt Waldman. Although someone should make a Matt Walkman right now, 5-ish. Yeah. Hint. And then what a playlist Matt Walkman would have, I'm sure. It would be fantastic as the playlist. Matt, by the way, Bloom, you'll notice that Matt doesn't let me control the iPod anymore when we ride 6 hours driving to Mobile. Like I did, and I think the metal gave him a headache. But anyway. Dr. Gene Bramall is at Gene Bramall. I'm Cecil Lammy, dreaming of Saucy Q and dreaming of you. Thank you very much for listening, for watching. YouTube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. The way that we've grown this YouTube channel, it's been fantastic. And we appreciate everybody. We, do this show and do the Sunday morning hangout, which gets, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 views every single week. So again, thank you guys. It's a lot of fun talking football with you. Everyone else, stay tuned, stay frosty.